Dear Dhamma friends, so we have come to the Dhamma sermon of this retreat. So may you all give your consent by saying Sadhu Sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Yanya deva bhikkhave paccayam paticca uppajjati viññānaṁ tena teneva sankham gacchati ti. Dear Dhamma friends, as you all know, typically any of our retreats are comprising of various parts. Actually, one part is the Dhamma sermon. Actually, there are many benefits in listening to Dhamma, and in particular, it is necessary to know a fair amount of Dhamma so that we know exactly what we are doing. So, it is very much like we are going on a path and we are searching for a particular goal, and if we know the path very well, and if we know the milestones, if we know the various marks on the way, then we are very much confident that we are leading towards the correct direction. We are going in the correct direction. Similarly, in the meditation also, it is not just sitting and observing something. Rather, there is a fair amount of book knowledge sometimes helps. On the other hand, Buddha in particularly says in Anuggahita Sutta, our practice has to be supported in 5 ways. First way is the Sila Anuggahita, where we have to establish ourselves in morality. That is why we all, after coming here, willingly take 8 precepts as our norm of the precepts, norm of our morality. It is not the typical standard that we are maintaining at our house, at our homes. Rather, once you come to a retreat, we are dedicating ourselves. We consider that it is a really important task, that we need to engage with it with a fair amount of morality which is uplifted than the typical precepts. So we therefore consider this practice involves with fair amount of dedication, and it has moral support as well. So Buddha says, therefore, our practice has to be supported with this morally, with this moral support. So we are honestly and trying our best to maintain precepts. It is not to very much to show others or to become kind of proud about it. Rather, we understand if we want to restrain our mind, if we want to develop, cultivate our mind, first of all, we need to have some kind of a restrained body and speech. Therefore, this moral restraint is in a way like the base of the meditation. And on the other hand, there is another Anuggahita, another support, which Buddha says Sutta Anuggahita, where we need to know fair amount of theory, which in a way helps us to go in the proper direction. Otherwise, sometimes if we are lacking knowledge, sometimes we don't know where we are heading towards. It is necessary therefore to have fair amount of knowledge, and that is what we are doing right now, to give you fair amount of knowledge on the path, what we are doing. And for that we are taking various suttas, that is the typical approach we are taking, and according to sutta we are matching our practice. In that way we can see side by side what Buddha has preached and what we are experiencing, what we are practicing, and what we are trying to achieve or what we are trying to reach. So in a way, mostly our doubts will be eliminated. And the other Anuggahita, another support, Buddha says, is the Sakacca Anuggahita, where the practitioners are discussing their experiences, sharing their experiences with the teacher. So it is not something that teacher always know everything, rather kind of revealing what one is going through, and maybe during the open discussion we are discussing each other, helping each other, and sort of clarifying various doubts so that we are ready to move forward without much doubt. And in a way, we need to have fair amount of knowledge to explain our experience. Otherwise, we don't know the vocabulary, how we have to explain it. And therefore, this explaining one's experience, explaining one's practice, what one has experienced during one's meditation is really essential part of our meditation. Because if we are simply keeping the experience to ourselves without revealing it, without exposing it, then very much like we are afraid of telling it to someone else. Think that we may be going in the correct direction, but sometimes this path is something that we are going which we have never gone. Sometimes books are helping, but our own experience, sometimes we can't interpret properly. Say for example, if someone is feeling a little bored on one's own practice, it can be due to various reasons. So sometimes teacher might say it's a sign of progress. Or sometimes teacher might say, okay, you have to improve your mindfulness, so you have to be diligent into your practice. So depending on where you are, the answer also might vary. Therefore, it is necessary to open up ourselves honestly and explain where we are going and how and when and what we are experiencing. So that is the Sakacca Anuggahita. Then we can go in this path in a fair amount of confidence. And the other two supports that Buddha says is essential are the Samatha Anuggahita and the Vipassana Anuggahita. So time to time we need to encourage ourselves to concentrate, to relax our mind without much of analysis or without much of observation. Rather, we simply allow mind to stand still or to stay with a particular object and to have some kind of calmness. It is also necessary because sometimes the Vipassana related, the wisdom related practice might appear dry. So it might not give always kind of a thrilling experience. It might appear dry. So time to time, therefore Buddha says, to encourage ourselves to have some blissful experience, it's also useful. Therefore this Samatha Anuggahita is also kind of a support that necessary time to time to encourage ourselves. The last Anuggahita, the support Buddha says that is in a way the most important, is the Vipassana Anuggahita, where we have to develop wisdom based on the practice. So if our if our practice is supported with these 5 ways, then Buddha assures that we are leading in a proper direction. So considering these facts, so we are now trying to take up a particular sutta in a way which is helpful to develop our practice, support our practice. So far, for about more than 1 year, we were taking the Silavanta Sutta, which comes in Kanda Sangyutta, which dealt directly with the Vipassana. And last time, I touched briefly about another sutta, which is called Tanhasankhaya Sutta. Actually, I have extracted certain parts of that sutta to explain certain aspects of the consciousness, the vijnana. So I thought of taking that sutta in detail and discuss so that we can learn a lot using that sutta. So therefore, for this coming series of the retreats, we are taking this particular sutta, which is called Maha Tanhasankhaya Sutta, which comes in Majjhima Nikaya. In a way, it is a little philosophical sutta, and on the other hand, it is touching the fairly deep aspects of Buddha's teaching, like Paticcasamuppada, the dependent arising, and in another way, it touches various wrong views that one might have, and again it touches the kind of the path which is Buddha is teaching us. So therefore, very much like it is touching various aspects of the Dhamma, and help us to therefore progress our practice, to develop our practice. So this is something kind of a plan that we are having in the mind, and I already discussed with Bhante Dhammajiva also about the plan. And another good news is on the same topic, on the same sutta, Maha Tanhasankhaya Sutta. We are now going through a small booklet, and in the future that will be published, and that also you may get in the future. So therefore, in various ways, taking this sutta as our new topic will be useful. So within that introduction, let's come into the subject, to the topic. So this sutta, as I said, comes in Majjhima Nikaya. Majjhima Nikaya is one part of the Sutta Pitaka. So this sutta in a way very useful because it is a kind of an incident happened during the Buddha's time. So incident also in a way kind of beautiful because one monk named Sati has get into a wrong view. So this venerable monk called Sati is a son of a fisherman, and he thinks that there is the same consciousness transmigrating from life to life. So this is something in a way against the Buddha's teaching, but this venerable is holding that wrong view tightly. And according to his understanding, he thinks, okay, in the past life there is a consciousness, vijnana, and the present life also it is continuing, the same consciousness is continuing, and the future births also the same consciousness is continuing. Very much like the same consciousness continuing from life to after the other. So you might think very much like the coming to like Atma, the concept of Atma, the self, and it is the very much close to that. It's very much again like the eternalism, where there is a unchanging, eternalist or ongoing consciousness. So this is a wrong view, and it is against the Buddha's teaching. Anyway, even during the Buddha's time, we can understand that certain monks already had their own views. So later on, some of his colleagues, some bhikkhus, get to know that Venerable Sati is having this kind of a view, kind of a wrong view, pernicious view, and therefore they went and discussed with him. So they approached this Venerable Sati and cordially they asked, is it true that you are having this kind of a view? And then Venerable Sati accepted, yes, as far as I can understand Buddha's teaching, the same consciousness available in the past, it is available right now, and it will be available in the future. So he openly tells that he is holding such view, and he thinks that is the correct teaching of the Buddha. And then venerable monks try to convince him, it is not true. You are holding a wrong view. It is against the Buddha's teaching. Buddha has, at many discourses, has mentioned that there is no such unchanging, ongoing consciousness. Rather, the consciousness is dependently arisen. It is a paticca-samuppanna, dependently arisen. So these monks are trying their best to convince Venerable Sati to change his wrong view. But Venerable Sati was holding that view strongly. He doesn't seem convinced. He is simply keeping on his own view. Now then Venerable monks, the other monks tried hard but failed, and then they went and informed this matter to Buddha. So they went to Buddha and explained that this particular venerable called Sati is having this kind of a wrong view, and we tried our best to convince him to change his view, but we failed. So then Buddha take one of the monk and ask one of the monk to go and ask Venerable Sati to come and meet him. So then Venerable Sati came Now the other monks are also in front of the Buddha, and Venerable Sati is also here. And then Buddha is questioning Venerable Sati. Is it true, Venerable Sati, that you are holding a particular view that the same consciousness is transmigrating from this life to the other life? So Buddha is asking directly from Venerable Sati. So then Venerable Sati says, yes, that is what I understood according to your teaching. As far as I understand your teaching, it's the same consciousness continuing from life to life. So then Buddha asks, when did I say like that? When did I say like that? In which particular sutta, at any particular occasion, did I say like that? Then Sati was little silent. He couldn't answer that question. And then Buddha asked from the other venerables, have you ever heard that I am telling such a point that the same consciousness transmigrating from life to life? Then the other monks are telling, no Venerable Bhante. So there is no any other place, or we have never heard such a teaching from you. Then it is very much like a court proceeding where the complainants are there, the accused are there, the chief is there. The Buddha is fortunately there so that he can question the monk and try his best to eliminate the wrong view. Unfortunately, even today there are many monks who are having some different views, but unfortunately we don't have Buddha to clarify those things. So they continue with those wrong views. But fortunately in this occasion, Buddha was there, so directly the issue has taken to the Buddha. Buddha openly take the issue. So he does not try to convince him by force, but he is asking from the other monks, did I ever mention such thing? Then the other monks, the majority, the congregation of the monks, they are telling, no Bhante, you are everywhere. At many suttas, you have mentioned that the consciousness is dependently arisen. So it says that, Aneka pariyayani no Bhante, patisauppannang viññānaṃ uttam bhagavata. At many places, at many suttas, that Buddha has mentioned that the consciousness is dependently arisen. Anyatra paccaya natti viññānasa sambhavoti. So this is the original terms, Pali terms coming in the sutta. So venerable monks are answering the Buddha's question that there is no consciousness if there are no conditioning or the causing conditions. So we can understand, according to the Buddha's teaching, it is very much like consciousness arising due to causes. So in Buddha's teaching, this patisauppana, arising due to causes, is one basic and one essential teaching of the Buddha. Sometimes we call as the patisaupada, dependent origination or dependent arising. So we'll touch that in the future because it is one part of this sutta. And Buddha therefore categorically says that the consciousness arising due to causes. And he gives a beautiful simile and explains one by one. And simile is also very beautiful. As you know, now if we want to generate fire, we need some kind of a fuel. Say if we are using kind of sticks, firewood, so then we can generate fire and we can call it as a stick fire. During the Buddha's time and even today in India, being an agricultural country, there are a lot of dry cow dung, and if they are using dry cow dung to generate fire, it is called cow dung fire. And similarly, there are other different fuel, and if fire is being generated using such a particular fuel, the generated fire can be named based on the condition, based on the cause. In today's term, we can simply think, okay, suppose we have kerosene oil. So if we are making a lamp using kerosene oil, we are simply calling it as a kerosene lamp. It's very simple, because that particular lamp, that particular light is generated using fuel which is called kerosene. And as we all know, we are offering coconut lamps to the Buddha, to the shrine room, to the pagoda. So we are calling it coconut oil lamps because the fuel is coconut oil. Similarly, say we are having now electric lamps. We are calling it as electric lamp because the fuel, the generating cause is electricity. So similarly, we can understand we can't have lamp or light without a source, without a cause. If we want to have a lamp, if we want to have a light, we need to have some causes, conditions should be available. Then we may be naming it with different such causing causes or causing conditions. So similarly, Buddha says, when a sense organ impeached with a particular sense object, there is a generated consciousness, made consciousness, and that consciousness is named based on the sense organ. Say for example, suppose our eye meets with visible form. Our eye meets with visible form, and then we call it as eye consciousness. Chakku and the Rupa and the generated the consciousness, the Chakku Vijnana. That is the eye consciousness. Because form is there, but the more prominent cause is the eye, so therefore it is named as eye consciousness. So if there is no eye or if there is no form, we can't have eye consciousness. Because eye consciousness is dependently arisen. And therefore Buddha says, so these are the two main causes for the eye consciousness to arise. And without these causes, eye consciousness may not arise. So similarly, when sounds and the ear comes together, meets together, due to that arise the ear consciousness. So ear consciousness is dependently arisen. Similarly, when smell and nose comes together, then the nose consciousness arises. Similarly, when tongue and the taste comes together, tongue consciousness arises. When the body and the tangible objects comes together, then the body consciousness arises. When the mind and the mind objects comes together, mind consciousness arises. Mind is the mana, mind objects the dhamma, and the resultant consciousness is called manoviññāna, mind consciousness. So we can see there are 6 categories of consciousness. So according to the Buddha's teaching, these are the available consciousness, and he particularly say cha viññāna kaya. There are 6 types of consciousness. And all 6 we can understand are dependently arisen. None of them are available readily. None of them are just prevailing, just existing. Rather, they then and there they arise based on the conditions. If eye consciousness to occur, eye has to meet with form, visible form. If ear consciousness to occur, ear and the sound has to comes together. If nose consciousness to occur, nose and the smell has to comes together. And if tongue consciousness to arise, then tongue and the taste has to come together. If body consciousness to arise, body and the tangibles has to come together. And if the mind consciousness to arise, mind and mind objects has to come together. So these are the 6 types of conditioned consciousness. Patittita Vijnana, conditioned consciousness, or Sankata Vijnana, fabricated consciousness, conditioned consciousness, and they cannot arise without causes. And according to the Buddha's teaching, none of these six last forever. So when these conditions cease, when these conditions vanish, disappear, the generated, resultant consciousness also disappear, because it is dependently arisen. So as far as we can understand, so if someone is telling that there is a continuing consciousness, there is a transmigrating consciousness, there is a unchanging consciousness, then it is against this dependent arisen nature of the consciousness. So what Buddha says is that consciousness is always dependently arisen. So if someone is telling that it is not so, there is some kind of ongoing, unchanging, everlasting, eternal consciousness, then it is entirely against the Buddha's teaching. Actually, this consciousness is not easy to understand. So, as we all know, Buddha uses 5 aggregates to explain ourselves. Say, for example, we are calling as I, me, you, and we are again giving various names. And those are the conventional reality. Say, for example, we have all our names. So, in order to identify ourselves, to recognize ourselves, to communicate among ourselves, so we have various names given. And again, we have other terms, other words, and various languages. So all these are, in a way, facilitates to communicate. And this facilitates, even though it facilitates communication, sometimes we forget that these are merely terms. These are merely conventions. And we sometimes trapped in it. So, therefore Buddha explains the thing called being, or kind of a, say, to explain that our experience, or to come to the roots, or to come to the passing the concepts to come to the reality, Buddha is using certain ways of explanation, and using aggregates is one approach. So he uses 5 aggregates, and he says that he uses these 5 aggregates to analyze what we call a being. So there are 5 aggregates: the form aggregate, Rupakkhandha, and then the Vedana, the feeling aggregate, then the perception, Sanya aggregate, then the Sankhara, fabrication or preparations aggregate, and then the Vijnana, the consciousness aggregate. So Buddha's teaching fairly explains these topics in depth. So having some understanding about these teachings is really useful, because it is sometimes very difficult for ourselves to understand what is really going on. So that's why we need some book knowledge, or some information, some knowledge from the Buddha, from his teaching, the Dhamma, and then only we understand, okay, this is the thing really happens. Because we ourselves won't be able to really analyze the way Buddha analyzes it, the way Buddha presents it. Because if it is possible, then we ourselves could be the Buddhas. But unfortunately, we don't have that capacity. So therefore, we take Buddha as our teacher. He is the one who knows, and we are simply his followers. So in a way, it depends on faith at the beginning. We have to trust the Buddha. And depending on faith, we are getting into the path. So therefore, in the teaching, the faith, saddha, is one essential factor which is fueling or facilitating our growth. our progress in the Dhamma. And sometimes it is called as a faculty, Indriya, Saddha, Indriya, Saddhindriya, the faculty of faith. It is very much essential because we don't know the whole existence or the whole experience, and therefore we borrow Buddha's teaching, or we therefore simply trust Buddha and his teaching, and we are putting ourselves into practice. But as we practice, as we ourselves go on the path, then we also get convinced. It is not that we are simply blindly following, but as we move forward, this teaching becomes more and more reliable, more and more realistic, and it is verifiable. Only at the beginning it has to be taken upon based on the trust, based on the faith, but it does not stay at that level. Say for example, when we are talking about a future birth, none of us has seen it, because we may not have a psychic power. We don't know what would be in the future. Similarly, when we are talking about past lives, we don't know where we were, what has happened in the past. But as Buddhists, we believe, okay, there was a past life, there would be a future life, there are causes causing a future life. So likewise, there are certain areas which we can't clarify through our own senses, because our senses are very limited. So we need someone who is much capable, someone who is trustworthy, so that we can, based on their wisdom, we can carry on in the path. But at least to some extent we can verify as we progress in the path. So that's the beauty of the Buddha's teaching. On the other hand, there are other teachings, other faiths, other religions, where the followers doesn't have the ability or doesn't have the capacity to question the teaching or to verify the teaching. They simply have to blindly follow it. But Buddha's teaching, on the other hand, have the capacity to verify, capacity to test for ourselves. But for that, we need fair amount of practice. So if we are simply trying to swim without getting into water, then we might go wrong. So that is why meditation helps us, in particular, to understand consciousness, vijnana. Without such understanding, without such verification, we can't internalize the teaching. Otherwise, it is very much like borrowed knowledge. So Buddha says, therefore, practice and then verify by yourselves. So in Dhamma, as you may very much aware, ehi passiko. So Buddha's teaching is qualified as a particular term called ehi passika. Come and see, come and verify for yourself. The Dhamma is inviting us. It is not the Buddha, but the Dhamma itself is inviting us. Come and test for yourself. For such a verifiable, such a living teaching that Buddha is giving us, teaching us. In a way, as Buddhists, we are very lucky that we have such a teaching available. So we ourselves can put it into practice, and we ourselves then have the capacity to verify it. It is not because merely that Buddha is telling that this is so and so, but we ourselves then have the capacity to test it, capacity to verify it, and then we get more and more convinced. More and more trust will be developed on Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, because we ourselves now have tested it. So, and again, it does not depend that the Buddha has to live in order to practice or in order to test the teaching. Rather, even after his passing away, still the teaching is available, still the teaching is verifiable, still the teaching is living. So if you can remember, in the Venerable Maha Sariputta, as a layman called Upatissa, so he simply approached Venerable Assaji and simply had a discussion. So Buddha was not available at that occasion at all. Venerable Assaji was simply the one of the five ascetics who helped the Buddha, the first five disciples, one of the five disciples. So Venerable Assaji then, in a way, reluctantly give the kind of a gift of the teaching. And Venerable Maha, this Upatissa, instantly, since his sharp faculties, was able to understand the teaching. So you can see, it is not necessary for the Buddha's presence for the teaching to understand. If one has the capacity, if one's faculties are matured, then one has the capacity to understand the teaching. And similarly, there are other venerables who practiced the Dhamma for several years and then they understood the teaching. Say, for example, Venerable Maha Rattapala. According to the Dhamma, he spent very much like 12 years to fully enlighten or to become an Arahant. So he took some time. Maybe various other venerables. So they take many years to practice and then they understood the teaching. So it is very much like depending on how much homework we have done. So it is not that every one of us have the same capacity. So we all come with some potential and we have to start from where we are. And we should not think that we have the capacity to the level of Venerable Sariputta. If we are thinking that we also, just by listening to some statements of the Dhamma, if we can become a Sotapanna, then very much like we are overestimating ourselves. But on the other hand, if we think that still this Dhamma is available, still this Dhamma is living, it is verifiable, and we take it and practice it. And more we practice it, more and more we develop it, cultivate it within our own hearts, then it is verifiable, then it is revealing, then it is more understanding, and more we trust it, more and more we comprehend it, because it is under very nose we can experience it. So no one else can deny it, because it is very much our own experience. So that is why the practice is so essential. So that is why we need to put forth a lot of effort to practice and understand the teaching. So it is possible to learn Dhamma through books, through Dhamma sermons, and it develops, as I said, the Sutta Jnana, the knowledge coming through hearing. And the other one, once we heard, so we can contemplate about it. We can logically think about it. We can rationalize it. Rationally we can think about it. And Buddha says that is called Chintame Jnana, which we are developing based on the reasoning. And Buddha says that itself is not enough. Those are only the two categories of the wisdom, knowledge. But Buddha says the third category, that is the Bhavaname Jnana, meditative knowledge, and that only be possible through practice. You can't have meditative knowledge without meditation. You can't develop meditative knowledge without you yourself put yourself into practice. So that is why practice is so important. And again, when we are practicing, we have to start like with a fresh mind. We can't have a conditioned mind in order to understand the teaching, in order to experience the teaching. That's why when we are putting ourselves into practice, our minds has to be very open. We have to have a beginner's mind. We can't practice as an expert. We have to practice like a beginner. Like the freshness of a child mind, if we have that kind of a receptivity, that kind of a openness, if we have in our mind, then this teaching will reveal, this teaching will blossom in our hearts. So, these five aggregates, therefore, touched or understood with the practice, and that is actually addressed at various levels of the Satipatthana. As we all know, Satipatthana the foundations of the mindfulness is the direct path according to the Buddha, which helps us to purify ourselves. So Buddha says, Ekayano ayam bhikkhave maggo sattanam visuddhya. So there's a direct path. That's one direct path for the cleansing, for the purification of the beings. Soka pariddavanam samatikkamaya. If they have sorrow and the lamentation, just to eliminate such sorrows and lamentation. Dukkha domanasthanam atthangamaya. So if they have any pain, suffering and grief, such to be eliminated. Nyayasa adhigamaya, to develop wisdom. Nibbanasa satchikiriyaya, to realize Nibbana, then that is the foundations of the Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness. So, if we are practicing foundations of mindfulness, so are we going to understand the 5 aggregates? So that's a valid question that we can ask. Because as I said in the beginning, so it is necessary to know little or fair amount of aggregates, knowledge of aggregates, and it helps us to understand the teaching of the Buddha. And is this 4 Satipatthana helps us to understand 5 aggregates? So that's a valid question. So, as we all know, there are 4 Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness. And if we take one by one, say for example, if we are starting Kayanupassana, so one is looking at one's body as body. So typically what happens is, we think this body is mine, this body is I am, this is myself. So that is in a way what we think. So when we are talking that I came from a particular place, okay, I came from Colombo, I came from Dehiwala, I came from Gampaha. So likewise, when we are talking in typical terms, what we refer is that our body was there and now here available in Kalalgoda. It is not that our mind. Our mind can go to any place at any time. But right now, body is sitting in Kalalgoda. So we simply say, okay, I am here. I am in Kalalgoda. I was in Colombo, I was in Gampaha, now I am in Kalalgoda, I am in Colombo. So you can understand internally. So we have a wrong notion that we identify with body. So with practice, slowly, we are eliminating this wrong understanding, this wrong perception. Kaye kayanupasti viharati. So one look at body as the body. It is not I, it is not mine, it is not myself. Rather it is a body. So it is happening, it is causing, or it is occurring, it is manifesting due to causes, certain causes. And we are observing this body very patiently and with some developed concentration, with mindfulness. And as we practice it, we get a lot of wisdom, and that helps to understand the form aggregate. So you can see the Kayanupassana, the first Satipatthana, first foundation of mindfulness, helps us to understand the form aggregate. Similarly, if we consider Vedananupassana, where one looks at various types of feelings. It may be a happy feeling, pleasurable feeling, it may be a neutral feeling, it may be even a painful feeling. But various types of feelings. Typically, when we are going through a pleasure, so we simply say, I am really happy. So that means I identify with the feeling. So I am representing myself as I am happy. So we can see we unknowingly have identified with the feeling. I am happy. So sometimes we say I was really suffering. At that time I was going through a real pain. I am really suffering. I was really suffering. So we can see we are using terms just to represent ourselves that at that time there was a kind of a bodily pain maybe, but we very much identified with it. Unknowingly we are trapped in it and we are representing ourselves based on the feeling. But as we develop Vedananupassana, seeing feeling as feeling, so we can slowly go out of this trap, go out of this wrong understanding, wrong perception. And therefore we will understand feeling as feeling. So in a way, therefore, Vedananupassana helps us to understand the feeling aggregate. And then we have Chittanupassana. Say we are understanding, okay, at a particular time my mind was lustful. At a particular time my mind was based on ill will. At a particular time my mind was deluded. At a particular time mind was really filled with loving kindness. So likewise we can understand various states of mind. So typically when we are telling like that, we are very much identified with it and we simply say, okay, I love you. So simply when we are calling like that, so we are representing some kind of a mental quality. But we call that I. We simply hold that I. We simply possess that quality of the mind. So we can say that we have trapped in the mental quality. But as we see these various states of the mind, as we see the various changing nature of the mind, so more and more we understand mind as mind. Chitte chittanupassee viharati. So more and more we understand the consciousness. So if one wants to understand consciousness aggregate, then one at least has to come to the level of Chittanupassana, looking at the mind as mind. Now we have two more aggregates left. That is the perception aggregate, the Sanya Khandha, and the fabrications or the Sankhara Skandha. So those two actually are even subtler and that only be understood at the Dhammanupassana level. So you can see, if one is developing these four foundations of mindfulness, gradually he may have a deeper understanding of these five aggregates. But on the other hand, what happens if you are not practicing? So that is what typically the experience, what we all are going through. Buddha says, Chakkuna Rupan Disva Piyarupe Rupe Sarajjati. So when we see a beautiful form through our eyes, if it is beautiful, then our mind go and attach with it. Our mind lusts with it. Piyarupe Sarajjati. Apyarupe Rupe Vyapajjati. If it is not pleasing, then we immediately get into ill will. Immediately we start hating it. So that is the typical experience when we are seeing something. If it is beautiful or if it is pleasing, we immediately lust, we immediately attach, we immediately attract to it. But if we don't like it, then immediately we repels from it and we get averse to it. Similarly, Sotena Saddang Sutva Sadde Piya Sadde Sarajjati. So when you are hearing a beautiful sound, if it is really pleasing, it is really pleasurable, immediately we lust onto it. Immediately we captures it. Immediately we want to hold it. And if it is some kind of a noise, some kind of a blame, then immediately we hate it. Similarly, if a pleasant smell we are smelling, then immediately we want to hold it, immediately we want to have it, and we likes it, immediately we want to own it. So that is what happens typically when we are going through a pleasant order. So if it is unpleasant, then immediately we want to go away from that place because it is really smelly. Similarly, we can understand, so if something is delicious, we want to have more and more. And if we want to have it on tomorrow as well. And we want to have it in our fridge. So because it is very tasty, we are now attached to it. We are lust on it. If something is bitter, if something is unpleasant, then we want to remove it. We don't want it. Similarly, if some kind of a sensation, tactile sensation is really pleasant, we want to own it. We want to hold it for a long time. And we want to have it on tomorrow as well. And we are so much trapped in it. And if something is hurting, if some kind of bodily pain is happening due to a particular sensation, then we want to run away from it. And if certain thoughts are going on, and if those thoughts are pleasing, then we will simply engage in thinking. So we all are very sort of habituate to think various things. If we have nothing to do, we simply think. We think and think whatever we like. So mind also very like to think, mental proliferation. So we keep on thinking on the things which we like. And sometimes mind go into very depressed states also, and even if we want to avoid such thinking, still mind goes on thinking. So you can see, mind is very much habituated to thinking. If it is pleasant, still it is thinking. Even it is depressing, still it is thinking. So we can see the typical behavior of our senses are really harming ourselves in the long run. Because if we are attracted to a particular scene, we might want to hold it. But if it is belong to someone else, or if it is changing, or if it is passing away, then ultimately we have to suffer. And if a particular sound is going on, if we can't hold it, and if it is changing, then we have to suffer. And if the feelings are pleasant, still they are changing. If we want to hold it, then we are going to suffer. And again, there are various mental proliferations, various thinking patterns. More and more we think, more and more we get trapped, more and more we get confused. So if we are fertilizing it, if we are encouraging it, ultimately we get utterly confused, utterly depressed. So we can see, so if we are simply avoid any kind of practice, we are living in a trapped way of life. So that is why Buddha says, the unmindful way of living is very much like dead. So that is why, as when Buddha's teaching is available, we are so fortunate that we have a way of going away from such a delusion. There is a way out of this typical conditioned pattern going on and on. So these things actually we have to learn little by little, and because more and more we practice, more deeper and deeper we are touching these deeper levels of the consciousness. And more and more we touch these deeper levels of consciousness, we ourselves have to encourage or to cultivate, educate ourselves how to avoid such a harmful way of thinking, harmful patterns of thinking. And that is where the consciousness aggregate is very important to understand. And we can see, even during the Buddha's time, based on the consciousness aggregate, even monks, not a typical layman, even monks had wrong beliefs, wrong views. So how about ourselves? So basically, if we don't really understand, then there's a higher possibility we can go in wrong paths, we can go in wrong views, hold wrong views. And that is why Buddha says, in a way, even the sila, even the morality, sometimes we may be grasping. That is why it becomes a silabbata paramasa. And only when one becomes a sotapanna, a stream winner, then only he understands, okay, this is the extent that I need to hold it, this is the extent I should not hold it. So likewise, then it becomes a kind of one's own experience. Otherwise, we don't know the limit. So similarly, we can understand. So there may be a potential in our mind to have wrong views, holding strongly. And we have to have some kind of openness, some kind of humility to listen to others and to accept if it is a wrong view. Otherwise, what happens is, if we are holding it very strongly, if you are not listening to others, if you are not ready to listen to others, if you are not ready to correct ourselves, and if we are not ready to drop our wrong views, ultimately we are trapped in wrong views. So many wrong views are discussed in this particular sutta, in this Maha Tanhasankhaya Sutta. So in the coming series of Dhamma sermons, we will get into one by one, and it's a deeper subject, and I hope this is enough for today. So with that explanation about the past story, what has happened during the Buddha's time, and how Buddha has approached the question, and started to revealing the problem and giving a deep Dhamma, and even today how we can get into such situation, and how we can understand the 5 aggregates using 4 satipatthana. So these are the things that I thought of useful today as a beginning of this sutta, and hope that will be helpful to all of us, and wish that using this series of sermons, may we be able to understand Buddha's teaching deeply and help us to practice and with trust, with fair depth of knowledge, and so that we have a encouragement, we have a clear vision where we are going, and which in a way helps us to continue our practice and to ultimately to free ourselves from all wrong views and to have the correct view. So thank you very much for listening.